You're listening to a Mel and Kim Productions podcast.
Renee Gracie.
Renee Gracie.
Rants Renee Gracie.
Driver Renee Gracie.
Renee Gracie.
Renee Gracie.
Hello and welcome to In the Backseat with me, Renee Gracie. Join me on this captivating ride as I speak to fascinating people who have dared to take unconventional roads to success. Let's buckle up and take the ride together. Welcome back to another episode of In the Back Seat. Today's special guest is Danny Rants. Welcome.
How are we?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on.
That's all right, no stress.
I'm really excited. Danny's been so kind and brought me a bottle of WetPussy, which will, if you're listening at home, I'm holding a bottle of alcohol in my hand if you can't see the WetPussy that I'm holding. And I was telling a funny joke about how when I moved into where I currently live, my neighbours were trying to be really nice and bring me a housewarming gift, and both neighbours actually bought me two separate bottles. One bought me one each because when they thought of me, they obviously thought of a bottle of WetPussy would be suiting for the type of person that I am, and I thought that was so funny. We drank it all in that night, and you made a lot of us very happy, and we had a great night, so thank you very much.
You were then super hungover the next day.
Yeah, we were all pretty fucked, to be honest, but I think I had also had a massive 3-litre thing of vodka too, and we drank that as well, so it was a big night. Not that I have big nights much anymore, but that was one that I regretted because I think I was hungover for about 3 days.
You gotta blow the steam off sometimes.
Yeah. So tell us about that. So tell us what your background in alcohol, pubs, clubs,
industry,
parties.
10 seconds, I always say short story long, but basically 18 years old, started running parties, dance parties, basically clubs and whatnot. Grew that from my first event made $2,000 to making a full-time living out of it pretty rapidly. Used to work as a sub promoter for venues, but also run my own nights and events and whatnot. Moved on to that. A couple of years later, started up bought a club when I was 26, I think. And then from there, actually had a bar before that too, so I owned bars and stuff, hospitality. Started up some festivals, from everything from food to music to cultural festivals. And then worked in that management, artist space, record labels, basically music. I'd say entertainment music, but if I had to describe what I did, I was a promoter, even though I had all these different businesses. Still am. I am a promoter. That's what I am, a music promoter. Yep. COVID hits. We have to pivot because everything's collapsed. So I've gone from making good income and living my life relatively well to making nothing. Start working in a bottle shop while I sort of find my feet again. Strangely enough, start selling fucking stoner pies, homemade stoner pies online, which is weird. Make enough to quit that bottle shop job. And then me and two other club owners come up with the idea of bottling and trademarking the name WetPussy shots, which I do. And we get that through, and then we sort of create a brand, which is sort of my forte, creating brands. I create that brand and we put it online. It goes viral. It goes viral, and we go from selling 2 pallets to our friends in clubs to selling hundreds of thousands of bottles a year. We're now stocked all over Australia. We're in all the majors minus Dan Murphy's. Dan Murphy's, get on it. And we then went on to do other brands. So we work with J-Up now, Grog. We have another one called Ugly. We just launched into 900 stores across Australia, which is with Australia's biggest independent promoters called Untitled. And we have a bunch of other little secret ones that no one knows in the back line. So but in saying that, people look at it and go, well, that's a massive pivot. But I sold piss before. I made events and I sold piss in venues and bars, and I sell piss now. And the only difference is I sell B2B now, whereas I used to sell B2C. So that's basically a short, long story of the last 20 years.
Yeah, which I find really interesting because obviously I feel like there's a fine line between liking alcohol and then actually drinking it, consuming it, partying and being a pisshead to wanting to create an alcohol brand. Yeah. And do you think that you get pushed into this stereotype of because you've made an alcohol brand multiple that you're a pisshead?
Yeah, for sure. So, and I kind of don't really drink a whole lot like that. And it's more so not that I don't like to have a drink. It's just I just don't have the time. Yeah. So I'm now doing this social media shit, which is new to me. When I'm not doing that, I'm working my full-time job basically for my alcohol company. And then I still run festivals and I still run events. So I'm doing that too. I don't have the time to consume booze, but being a nightclub owner / promoter and owning an alcohol company, I think that people's first instinct on me is that I'm this wild fucking crackhead, basically.
Yeah.
But it couldn't be further from the truth. I don't think I could have done as much as I have if I was, if that makes sense.
I agree. If you're an alcoholic, even if you're like a highly functioning alcoholic druggo, there's only so much you can do.
I'd be the best in the country.
yeah. When you were growing up, you said that you had a club at 21.
Nah, 25.
25.
Yeah.
What
I had a bar at 21. I owned a bar at 21.
A bar at 21 and then a club at 25. How did that happen? How did that come about? Because I feel like in the background you can say that you own a bar or a club, but there's obviously licensing and I feel like there's a lot of loopholes. On top of that, money's clearly something. So how did you fall into that position to be like, oh, there's a bar that I want or this club I'm going to purchase?
So basically the way it worked for me was that I have the crazy ability still to this day to move heads, right? So when I say move heads, that's an industry term, but to get people together. Yeah, and so for whatever reason, when I was younger, I sort of was effectively not a foster kid, but I moved that much. Yeah. So I moved into like 16 different places, went to multiple schools, played different football function clubs. That function doesn't make sense, but you know what I was trying to say. Yeah. So I had this knack of being able to like make friends pretty quickly and then kind of maybe get some influence in those groups and then move them around.
Yep.
So I always like wanted to run parties and I was a good time guy. Like I just loved everybody having a good time. I loved partying too. That's a big part of it. So when these bars were running and nightclubs, the opportunity kind of came to me because people were like, okay, we're going to run, you know, build the bars. We're going to do this space. We're going to get the licensing. We're going to do whatnot, everything. But you need people in a bar. You can't make money without people in a bar.
Yeah.
So the opportunities would come to me where people would come and say, hey, like we're going to set this up. We need someone to come in here and make sure people come. So I would come in and I'd do my thing, right? Like wave my magic wand over, create a brand, create a community, pull people through, and then I would work in that space. But as I went along, I kind of took more and more roles. So I would say I'd learned in running them, but because I ended up being like a GM of the club at one point. Like I was dealing with everything from smash windows to to fucking licensing to which is like with the police to running the club. So I kind of learned on the field, but the opportunities came to me from bringing heads, and then how I got the money for it was bringing heads because I was doing like 200-300 events a year.
Yeah, wow.
And at that period of time. So, and of that, it's kind of really simple maths. I'll probably explain it. But you pay $20 to get in.
Yep.
I keep that. So I would pay the DJ out, the door girls out, and then everything else I'd keep. If you're doing 300 events, you're kind of making anywhere between minus 4,000 to 20 grand.
Yep.
So it's just a game. It's like glorified gambling in a sense. So I would just kind of bet on these events, do as many as I possibly could, and then I'd just win on more than I lost, and that's how I make my money. But it's pretty simple. But the thing is, I was making really, really good money really, really early. So at 21, I was doing events. I was making like $18,000.
Yeah, wow.
And
you're doing multiple a year as well. Yeah.
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 But
Wow.
I didn't spend it that well. It was only like down the track, I sort of started to slow down a little, and I was like, I need to facilitate something to be a bit more secure. When I was young, I was just. But like I'd spend fucking 10 grand a week sometimes. I reckon.
Yeah, wow.
It was easy come, easy go.
Yeah, when you're saying that you're going to these places and you're building a brand, building a community, what does that look like?
So for me, it's like it's super simple. So I used to do every genre of music, right? So like most promoters, you'll get like a techno guy, you'll get like a guy who just does commercial dance or just does like emo bands, right? Where I was probably a little bit different, and probably I would still say no one really has done what I did in a sense when it came to like city and regional, was that I did everything. So I did everything from the coolest fucking nights you could do with like techno artists from Berlin to full blown cheesy out of suburban, top 40 Nova sort of stuff. So, but for me, and I did everything, R&B, psytrance, fucking you name it. Like there's not a genre, Aussie hip hop that I didn't sort of deal with. But for me, I sort of, and I guess it was maybe because I moved, so I had to chameleon a little bit. But the way for me was I was like, cool. I'd watch how those communities would engage, and I could see the brands they wore. So be it the clothes, the music they liked, the film clips they watched, their covers of the art of the music, and I would just make something that made sense inside that community. Yeah, and then I would find some pillars, I used to call them, and I'd find these people in those communities, and I'd sort of like talk to them, kind of, I guess, onboard them. Yeah. And then I'd say, look, you're going to be the pillars of this community. And then I would build this community around a brand that I created for them. And then I would get them to attract everybody. And then I'd sort of infiltrate myself in there. Yeah. And then I would sort of build that community and strengthen it by giving them opportunity, by giving them something to like, look up to and like to achieve towards or whatever. So, and then I would give them that opportunity. So they become, they might be able to leave their jobs and work with me within that community. So I was very, very good at replicating and then creating communities. And that's probably why my success was from moving people.
Yeah. And where did you learn that skill, or is sort of building the community is just a part of sort of being a good times guy and just giving people opportunities and having fun? It just works with itself, or how do you learn that?
I think it was because I had to move a lot. So like when I moved a lot, I kind of like, I live in the country, a place called Broadford, which was like, everyone was listening to Blink-182 and they were like, punks and motorbike riders.
Yeah.
Like, and then I moved to a place called Vermont where everyone was like an Adidas tappers and and they were listening to Dr. Dre. And so I quickly had to learn how to sort of change to sort of fit into other communities. So because of that, I saw the difference. I was very aware of it. I was sort of watching from the sidelines, and then I just sort of saw how you could, like, you know, move people around or influence people by creating these spaces for these people. But at the same time, I was passionate about it. So like, it wasn't like I was just doing it just for money. Like I loved that grassroots of culture, especially music. When you sort of build a community, those people come in, start to blow up, they get opportunity. Like guys I worked with have gone on to make millions and millions of dollars in the music industry across the world. But watching that bubble part at the start, like I just got a high out of it. So I just created all the time.
Yeah. So you obviously had a passion for music from a young age.
Yeah, definitely.
Did you chameleon your music taste where you were, or have you always sort of had one genre, or you've just been a passionate music listener?
So like, and I think again, so growing up, and it's like not to go deep into it, but I had a pretty rough life when I was a kid. Moved around a lot, obviously, didn't really have role models, a lot of alcoholism and drug addicts and stuff like that. So music was like a way for me to escape. So when I was a kid, it was like cool, you know, put in headphones and I would listen to all different genres, but it was a way for me to like get away from where I was. So it was like reading a book or whatnot. Yeah. And so but for me, when I grew up, it's always been like that. So it's like, I will go to the country, I'll listen to country music. I'll go out with my mates, you know, I'll pump myself up at gym, I'll listen to like hard trance or fucking heavy metal. Yeah. And like, so it's occasional mood. Like I use it as almost like a drug, if that makes sense. So and because of that, there's not a genre I'm not open to or don't like really.
Yeah. And then I think because you listen to so much, you can definitely see when there's something new and upcoming, or because you've listened to so much music, you can go, oh, I haven't heard that kind of style, or I haven't heard that before. Is that what 100%.
It is? Yeah. So you like watch it and I can see the bubble. So it's like exactly the same thing happens. It's like, that's the part where I guess is interesting, but every time a music genre blows up, the exact way it blows up is exactly the same every single time. So when you're replicating these communities, you're like, cool, it's a bunch of kids who are really, really cool, 10%. They get into it. They're really, really engaged in it. Small club, small space. There's normally some form of backlash. Like there's some sort of people being like, we don't like this, or fuck this music off, rah, rah. And then what happens is that attracts, the attention attracts more people. And then it kind of like gets to a point where it tips and then it becomes mainstream and blows up. But it's always exactly the same. And then the cool people leave and then they abuse they get onto the next thing. And then the people who will diehards for that, they abuse that genre. Yeah. And so it's exactly the same method every single time.
Yeah, wow, that's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
My thought of the industry is that there can be real cunts that are running these nightclubs and that you're going to deal with, but then there's probably some really incredible people. Did you struggle with meeting people, or did you have any interactions with people who maybe tried to get you out of what you were doing, or were you met with encouragement?
Weirdly enough, not from family and friends. Like, so like I always got my friends, I'm not really sure why, but they weren't supportive until I was well further on and they realized it was a career. Everyone was like, what are you going to do when you grow up? And I was like, oh, fuck, I'll worry about that later. And then my family was like, you need to get a real job. So that was like a really hard thing for me, was like, you know, trying to work in this. And even though I was making heaps of money, no one was really taking what I was doing serious until probably I was like 30. But in the industry, for sure, like people who were doing it, it's very, very, like we call it the shark pool. But it's like that, people try and crush you. So as you're coming up, there's a constant sort of like, you know, they're trying to stop you from getting opportunity or do well because you're taken from the pool that they created. Yeah. And there's only a certain amount of pool that you can. So, but in saying that, when you work with club people especially, the word cunt is probably not a bad term, but I would say crazy. Like there's people who are legitimately crazy because you mix super passionate people who are centric to take a lot of drugs. Like that's the reality. So I would say I've worked in all kinds of industry. Yeah, like I've worked with fucking influencers, B-grade celebrities. I've worked with sports stars, whatever. Nobody as crazy as music and club people.
Yeah, I could imagine that there's probably some quite egotistical people too. Like if they own a really good nightclub or something, and then all of a sudden you're doing an event at another club across the road, like territorial.
Totally,
and they could potentially try and like ruin you, whatever it may be. Or I could just imagine that there'd be some loose units in the industry that would probably go to any lengths to try and destroy you, right?
100%.
Yeah.
Like I've seen everything from like, you know, people punching on in the main street over posters being wrapped around poles to like death threats. Yeah. Like I've had heaps of death threats myself. And then other people just like generally reporting you to the newspaper, giving you stuff to license. People will do whatever they can. But it's sort of it's a part of the parcel. Like unfortunately, that's just the game. And then I don't know. I used to always sort of say like, you know, one of my things I used to say when I met someone, I'd be like, do your research on me. If you can find someone I fucked over, then don't work with me. So there is guys out there that kind of live by the morals that I do. But at the same time, there's just as many people out there who do the wrong thing and are still successful.
Yeah. And how do you go with finding the good guys then?
Sometimes the good guys you think are good guys don't end up being good guys.
Yeah,
so
that's
you kind
standard.
of got to like work with them and work it out. But it's not when you work again in hospitality. These people are great at talking. Yeah, like they're good at masking in a sense. So you don't really know until you work with them. And I'm not even going to say it's a percentage. Like there's probably more shitty people than there is good people in the industry, as bad as that sounds.
Oh, I come from motorsport, so that's fucking 1,000% the case in motorsport. There are more shit people than there are good people. And I can just imagine the hospitality industry and what you're in is kind of pretty similar.
Yeah, probably.
It's big dollars too. And
That's right.
that attracts the shit people.
And they make a lot of money, and that's exactly right. So, but the thing about it is that the good people who are around, they're the ones who stay the longest. So like we'll get like flash in the pan guys. They'll come and make a lot of money for 4 or 5 years, and then everyone finds them out and they get collapsed. So you can't be a bad guy forever.
Yeah.
You can be a good guy forever though. So, but in saying that, it takes a lot longer to grow what you're doing when you're not trying to take
When you're trying to do it properly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. When you are in this owning clubs, doing all this stuff, promoting, when you said before that you got into music, obviously those two worlds are combined, but can you sort of explain that to us when you're in the music, but then you've gone from, bringing heads and bringing people in to managing artists and doing that side of things?
Yeah. So like the way it kind of works is that traditionally you'll find an artist that you think is worth managing and then you do a deal with them. The industry sounds like 20%. And then basically what you do is you say to them, hey, I'm going to help you like get better. But what you do is you're a key holder. So like I'll try to find someone who's got a little bit of momentum and then I'll say, cool, you've come this far, which is great, but I can take you here now because I can talk to all the right people to get your music listened to. So it's like a shortcut in a sense. But why there's a lot of club owners that work in management or vice versa is because, and this is sort of something that's a little bit kind of fucking the music industry at the moment, but nightclubs are hated universally by government. Yeah. And so like, after the COVID lockdowns, nightclubs didn't get cash. Music venues did. But the thing is, the most music artists who blow up, especially in the dance genres, they come from nightclubs. So like the government is sort of works anti their nightclub space, but in saying that, we probably develop more fucking giant artists than live music venues do sometimes, And so, and that's because of the drugs, the fights, the gangsters, all that sort of shit, like all the negative stuff, like that we don't get that support. But so what happens is you can see it early stages. It goes back to that bubbling. Like I can see a guy blowing up, getting more popular. He's bringing more heads in. He's getting more creative, whatever it is. So at that point, I take him and I take him along the ride to up the ladder of like, major labels or festivals or whatever like that, because we all kind of talk together because we're in that one industry. It's actually a pretty small industry.
Yeah.
And that's why a lot of nightclub owners, promoters manage artists.
Yeah. It's sort of, when you think about it, they're two separate industries, but they're kind of not.
Well, they rely on each other. So like,
yeah.
It's an interesting one I say to people all the time. Like people are like, what's the best advice for a DJ? And I say, you got to learn how to bring people. And they're like, I don't really have that many friends. I'm like, well, I'm not saying bring your friends. I'm saying figure out a way that you can bring people, be it make music, be it stand out, be it fucking, like have a community that you can bring along with you or connect to a community or, or actually just have heaps of mates and network flat out.
Yeah.
And the reality of it is that nightclubs don't exist without people bringing people in. And the best way to bring people in is music. So they coincide. So they kind of, and two entities that separate, it's like popcorn and movies. They need each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
So without popcorn, the cinema, the Hollywood doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Which is the truth because that's how they all make money. Without alcohol and venues and bars, music doesn't exist. Yeah. And so it's like, well, it does exist, but you know what I mean? Like not to the level that it does. So it's like they have to go together.
I think that's something that you highlight really well on your social medias as well, is that there are so many things like what you said with no support from the government or anything, and how some industries are so shunned, but they're so important, and people have these perceptions of things in regards to even what you do and being a promoter in this industry, and how you must be an alcoholic and you must be a cracky and you must not be a good guy. And it's so funny because I feel like it's a weirdly taboo industry, but it's quite like there's a lot of money in it and it's quite important. And I feel like you're constantly almost not fighting that battle, but you are highlighting a lot of that stuff on your social medias constantly, and you're almost trying to do right by this industry and show the good. Yeah,
for
really
me, it's
are.
like I fucking hate. Yeah, like so that's like we talked about it earlier. I'll go to like pick up my kids from school, and people find I'm a nightclub owner, and there's this weird sort of like what like it's basically like I'm saying I'm a criminal. I've been to jail.
Yeah.
But then on the other spectrum, you watch these people just rinse through festival owners, and I'm like, oh, they're fucking making all this money. They're doing all this stuff. So that's what motivated me. I was like, I'm sick of people saying this. Yeah. Like they think that we're these evil people who are like shit drug addicts that rip everybody off because the drinks are $16. But what they don't realize is I know more broke festival owners than I know millionaire festival owners. They're outliers. Yeah. Like it's obviously the dream where everyone starts it, but most guys who run festivals are just fucking passionate music lovers who are a little bit eccentric. Yeah. Like, they're not making millions of dollars. Like if anything, they're losing hundreds of thousands before they make money. So all I'm trying to do is just shine light on like the reality. Yeah. And it's been like people loving it, but majority of the comments I get are like, didn't think about it like that. Like that's like my number one comment is like, didn't think about it like that. Like recently there was a festival that got shut down due to fire. Like I don't know if you saw it. It was called Pitch. And I just literally jumped on. I'm like, cool. I understand that you guys think that they're fucking people over and they're trying to do this, but this is how it works. And I explained how like the fire department has to hand down to the government so that they can get insurance. But if they don't do it, they can't get insurance. If they do that, they'll go broke. I went through this whole detailed thing. And then even the guys who ran that festival, they said their hate was so massive. I did that video, got like 500,000 views and it shifted. So then people started supporting, but I'm like, it's just not as simple as what you think. You know? Like, and in our industry, for whatever reason, don't know why, no one wants to talk. They just like always hide and it's real. We kind of continue to stay elusive.
Probably that's why though, because of the hate that they get online, and people's assumption is that, oh, you're fucking making heaps of money off us, like fuck you, but people don't actually realize. And I feel like you have definitely, you would have to have been the first person in this industry to actually take the forefront and actually explain things intelligently within detail and explain things properly. And people actually do sit back and go, oh, didn't think about that. I didn't understand that. And you're almost like the good guy for the industry.
Kind of weird, but yeah.
But people want you to be the bad guy, but you're actually not. You do the opposite, and I think it's really interesting. Some of the shit that you talk about is like fucking like mind blowing. I was addicted to watching your TikToks at one stage.
You're listening to In the Backseat with Renee Gracie.
Had your first club, your first nightclub, 25. What was like the most fucked thing that happened to you where you were like, holy, like this could be it? Like a pivotal moment when you had that club and you were like, fuck, this is bad.
Wow. Well, I've got a couple. So like one was we had police, right? So we bought this club, we were like, sweet, done. We actually had two things. So first off was we started building, and I talked about how like the shark pool. So we started building, and all of a sudden randomly the council turns up. And the council has been tipped off by someone. Yeah. And so someone who doesn't want us to open. Yeah. And they come in and they're like, they've got like tape measures and shit, and they're like, you know, this is not right, this is not right, this is not right. So we had to wait for 6 months. So I'd left my job to build this club that cost us like $1 million. And then someone tipped us off on purpose to fuck us over. So we couldn't open for 6 months. So we couldn't make any money from trade. I was getting paid like nothing, $0 for 6 months. But that was one. But the second thing after that was when we first opened, the cops came so hard down on us. So they kind of come in because, again, what I talked about, they automatically think that we're bad. Yeah. Even though the regulations you have to get a license, like you have to have no convictions, not even a drink driving conviction to have a license. Yeah, wow. They still think you're a bad guy. So then they came in on us after our first week, and you have like a demerit point system. So don't hold me to the exact demerit points, but let's use a license as an example. But they gave us 11 points, which meant we had 1 point. Wow. So we had to sit in there with like.
And you had just opened.
And I'm young, and I've never run a club, needed anybody that we'd worked with this. So we're sitting in front of like 8 cops just fucking drilling us about rubbish, this, and like screaming at us, for trying to create something. And then we didn't really do that much wrong, but they didn't want to give us a leash. Yeah. And so they would straight away were like, you can't fuck up. Yeah. And so that's an interesting thing too that I guess people don't know is that they don't allow you to fuck up because the police really aren't for you. Yeah. And it's sort of weird because as you build a relationship down the track, I remember one of the guys saying to me, you know, since you guys started, the crime rate locally has actually dropped because we deal with it because they all come in. Yeah. So instead of punching on in the street or, you know, driving around cars drunk or, you know, having house parties to get out of control, they're coming to us, and we've got 17 security guards, cameras everywhere, scan systems, whatever. Yeah. So we actually track, as bad as it sounds, the shit away from, we give them rules and regulations. So it's an ecosystem that actually probably helps them. Yeah. But they still, for whatever reason, don't really like us.
Yeah, they're kind of against it.
Yeah.
When you're starting to grow and you're starting to do all this stuff, you then moved into alcohol and making alcohol yourself. I would love to know, and can you talk into detail about what that process is like? I'm sure there's lots of listeners who would love to know. How do you get into making an alcoholic beverage that you can sell?
So basically, we're effectively like an alcohol marketing company in a sense. So we actually don't at my factory make it. But what we do, the process is what I'm happy to tell people, because the hardest thing with alcohol is selling it, not making it. But we would just come up with the concept idea, and then you go to a place that's called a flavor house, and then you basically go back and forward with them, and they continue to make these recipes, and you taste test until you get to a point you're like, yep, this is what I want.
I like that, flavor house.
Yeah, and then what you do too is you actually go collect, like from some of our stuff, we go to lolly shops and we'll just buy all the grape lollies, and then we'll just go take them there, and they'll go, yep, cool, sweet, and they'll figure out what the ingredients are in those things, and you sort of like emulate off it.
Wow.
And then once we do that, then it goes through like a vigorous sort of like legal process of where we get the vodkas from or the alcohols from, how it's all made, and it's made in giant vats, and then it gets pumped into these bottles. But that process is probably the easiest part, which is kind of mind blowing. But the tax is fucking insane. That's like, to give you an example, to make a bottle of high end vodka is like $4. The tax on it's 28, which is wild.
What?
The tax on a bottle, so you cannot get a bottle for under like $32, $33. But to make a bottle is anywhere between sort of $2 to $4.
Wow.
That's including lid, glass, label, the whole lot.
Wow.
So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it's unique. So we, but.
And that's Australia only, or is that sort of like
Australia only,
okay, yep.
New Zealand's not as bad, but they're sort of bad. And then everywhere else is like, if you're in America, you can buy a litre of Jack Daniel for like $12.
Yeah.
But in Australia, it's like, there's no way. It's like $60, $70.
Wow, that's crazy. That's good to know, I guess, so people know now if they're sort of supporting like a small local business or a local alcohol brand of some degree.
For sure. And that's
the prices are high for a reason.
Well, no, that's like everybody. Like even if you, like Belvedere, Smirnoff, like they all have to sit in those same rules. But to become an independent alcohol brand, there's been a whole bunch go broke recently. Bilson's, Mighty Craft, which owns Better Beer. It's very rare because it's sort of like 4 giant entities. That's Coca-Cola, Asahi, Lion Nathan, which is actually owned by someone else, can't remember the name. And then the last one is, fuck me, I can't remember, but there's 4 of them. And they basically own everything. Yeah, and so like there's only like, the percentage of the industry is probably 90% owned by these 4 giant brands.
Yeah, wow.
And then there's like 10% independent. So that's why I say like making an alcohol brand's easy to do, but to sell it is fucking hard because you're competing against people with millions and millions and millions of dollars.
And it doesn't matter if they lose a bit of money if they're selling, if they're not making as much profit because they've got their fingers in every other pie and every other type of alcohol.
And I know I'm like a bit of a whistleblower, but like they don't have the same rules as us. So like
that doesn't surprise me,
Yeah, so for argument's sake, we have Wet Kitty, and that just got booted out of Coles. And the reason why I got booted out of Coles is because this company called ABAC decided that it was too provocative. But then you got Hard Solo, which turned to Hard Rated, which looks exactly like Hard Solo.
Yep.
And you've got Brookvale Union, which has cartoon characters over it and it's bright coloured cans. They go straight through. Yeah, and so like the rules that we have to abide by are a lot stricter because we can't fight against this body as much. We don't have as much pull of power. So again, it's very much similar to a nightclub. We're always swimming upstream. So we're always coming up to these challenges that these bigger groups don't have. And even from a perspective of like, those big Dan Murphy's, Coles, whatever, like they're looking at us going, well, how can you facilitate this? You're a small independent company. They don't want to deal with necessarily with too many independent companies. So yeah, it's difficult.
How do you overcome that? Can you sell online? You can sell alcohol online on a website, obviously with the right licensing and stuff, I assume.
We sell heaps online.
And that's probably the new way of overcoming and relying on people?
No, like so if we sell more booze still in store than we do online. But to be honest, it's just fucking stomping your feet. Like if you've seen anyone see my brands, if they don't, go check them out. But they're pretty provocative. Yeah, like so they're all sort of like on the borderline of like, good or bad in a sense. So basically what I do is I just stomp my feet and make so much fucking noise that no one can ignore me.
Yeah.
So I just literally just continue to say, slam the hammers down. Like this is what I'm going to do. Blah, blah, blah. Get papers, articles. We're getting influencers involved who are effectively independent. Creating my own brand. That was part of the reason why I did that myself. I just keep shaking from the bottom of the tree and I can't be ignored now. So now they're like, well, can't beat him, join him. So we had to go against like legal letters and we had to go against being attacked by these giant corporations who had more money than us. We had to figure our way around it. We still are. But at the same time, now we're 3 years in and we're sort of here to stay. Like we're not getting as much negativity that we used to because I think they're like, these guys aren't going anywhere.
Yeah, fuck, they're still here. We might as well deal with them.
Correct.
I was going to say it'd be good if there was a way that you didn't have to fucking rely on like Dan Murphy's and all those people as an independent because it's quite obviously because you're competing. You want to be in Dan Murphy's but you don't want to compete against the other guys and you want to go do your own thing. It makes it kind of like hard for people who are starting because you kind of have no other option.
Well, Dan's owns 60% of the market.
Yeah.
Coles is 20 and the other 20% is independents. So your brand can only get to a certain level, not using them too.
So selling online is probably a good thing, obviously.
It is, but again, like it's hard, it's challenging.
Yeah,
like
with Australia Post
I'm more
and
than happy to
selling.
say the figure, but like we did just over 2 million last year online, which is insane. But we are probably one of the biggest e-commerce brands in alcohol because the slabs are too expensive to send.
Yeah.
So we just happen to be bottle a certain amount. We got the price and the margins. Like we're in a perfect storm. So to try and sell alcohol online is pretty fucking hard.
Yeah, I could imagine it's hard.
again-
And breaking and fragile and
Correct.
fucking postage is getting more expensive. So that's a whole nother thing which you don't have to worry about if you're selling in a shop.
Even off that, I probably should say, but we spent $600,000 to get those results. So again, like when you're starting out, it's like you need to be able to have that much money sort of coming in or that much demand or that much attention to be able to fund that to do it properly. That makes sense. So if you're a small out business and you got $40,000 a year, it's probably not going to get you very far.
Yeah, it's interesting how difficult it is and how like savage the industry is. But also, is it like this in Australia, just Australia, or is it like this overseas? I feel like Australia just runs their own race sometimes.
I was in
for
New
some
Zealand
shit.
recently and it was a lot easier. Like I was getting meetings straight away, like in a day. But again, I don't know if it was because, again, like talking about shaking from the bottom of the tree, but I've been shaking the bottom for 3 years. So when I went there, people already knew who I was. Like I was meeting guys and they'd seen my social media and they'd done whatever. So I feel like I made it easier for myself. So I can't really talk on it, but it was definitely difficult from here, especially being like, again, a club guy.
Yeah.
Trying to compete with these giant fucking multinational companies. It's like, it's not in your favor.
What's one thing of advice or one thing that you, for the listeners especially, that you've learnt across your journey? I feel like you're quite resilient by the sounds of it, but what would be some advice that you would give to someone who's listening who maybe wants to start something or pivot in a career and pick a new career path? You could teach them something or tell them don't give up or whatever it may be.
Yeah, my one is like keep failing. Like as I say it all the time and people are like, I see guys, like I'll say guys start up a business, right? And they fail once and they're like, I'm never doing that again. I'm like, dude, I've fucking failed more business than I've succeeded in. So it's like, don't be afraid of people failing. Another one I say a lot is that winners don't pay out people for trying. Only losers do.
Yep.
So ignore that back noise and keep moving forward. Yeah, like when I was having my wins and losses and whatever, the losers that I hung around with were happy to highlight my losses, but they didn't want to talk about my wins.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't fucking listen to that background noise. Keep moving forward. Keep failing. Like, people go to university, it costs them $400,000 to learn something that they then have to learn how to use in practical, life. It's like, well, that's my university degree. So all that money I've lost, all those businesses I flopped, that's my university degree. You don't do it twice. If you do, you're an idiot. Yeah. And so keep failing until you succeed, which is, I know, a weird kind of advice, but it's like, failing is not a negativity. It's a good thing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of people can attest to that. I think a lot of people, even from my personal experience with my story, they thought just because I failed at one thing, they just naturally assume, it's all over for her.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people don't have the resilience to keep going. And you think you've got a great story of the resilience and to keep pushing. I've got one last question because it feels like you're all about the brand and you've come forward and you like starting and you talk about this bubble and you like picking things up. Are you in that bubble right now? Did you sort of set yourself up to start your own brand? Was it intentional or did you just
intentional.
It was, yeah.
So I was like, I basically was watching other guys that I knock around with and they were killing it. And I was seeing what a post could do. Like they could generate $26,000 in a post. And I was like, fuck. So I'd always spent my time building brands. Like WetPussy is a brand, no one knew who owned it. And I'm like, fuck, if they can do it, I can do it. Like I feel like, and I'm knocking around with some of the biggest names in Australia just because they're in my network. I just always decided never to be in the front of the camera because it just wasn't the place for me. But I was just like, I just legitimately, it sounds wild, but I said to my missus in November, I'm like, I think I'm going to become an influencer next year. And she's like, doesn't work like that. I was like, I posted like 4 videos and did 5 million views or some shit. So not to say, but in saying that, what I will say, not to like completely sugarcoat it, but I had done shit beforehand. Like I posted stuff and had a crack at it here and there and sort of decided I was going to do it and committed and uncommitted and did all that shit. And I would get, one video would do, I had a video that last year did like 2 million views. Then I had one that did 2,000. I was like, fuck, it's not for me. Yeah. Like, so I couldn't take that internal pressure that I thought people were watching on. And what I would say is that I just kept kind of experimenting, but what it changed was when I decided to commit. So once I was like, fuck it, I don't give a fuck what anyone says. I'm going to build a brand because I can see the objective I can get out of it afterwards. And I've seen how much people can change their life by doing it. If I get ragged or I get roasted or people celebrate me, I don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I started posting every single day. Then I started seeing massive success. So that, again, it's like people look at it and go, this guy came out of nowhere. He's this massive success story.
Yeah.
But the reality of it is I'm probably putting 15, 16 hours into this social media shit. Yeah. And like I'm working it like a job. And like everyone's like, how have you done this so quickly? And I just legitimately just refuse to say no for an answer. And I just keep going. And then I've just accumulated these massive amount of views, but I'm looking at it from like a business, like I don't look at videos per views. I look at my month. So I'm always looking at like, I did 5.7 million views this month. How do I get to 6 million views? So then it stops me from looking at videos getting disheartened because one flopped. Does that make sense? So I'm able to be able to treat it like a business, and so far so good, it's working.
Yeah, that's cool. And then do you think that now that you've committed to the social media thing, do you think that because you have committed and you are fully committed to growing and becoming an influencer, like you said, is there a correlation to the success? Has it gone back to your brands? Are people can see that it's connected?
So we did a organic campaign recently. We have these like Sourpuss cans. They're like RTDs, you can drink to 8%. And I ran the whole thing. We didn't spend any money. So I generated like $40,000 in launch. Yeah. And so being able to do that normally would have cost us $10,000. Yeah, to be able to do that. So that's a really small example. But the other one's just opportunity. Like getting into rooms. I was always pretty good at it. But like now it's like I'm bumping into people that I've been watching online for 5 years and like, hey, Danny. Yeah. So that makes it easy. And then the other one too is just the opportunity that's come from it. So I'm still just, again, I've committed just to stamp my feet and make heaps of noise for 1 year. I'm actually not trying to monetize it. Like I've definitely seen growth in different bits of my business. I'm just trying to like spend 1 year focusing on this and then I'll just see where it goes after that. But
and see what happens.
Yeah.
What are your future plans? Can you tell us?
Yeah, I've got my festival coming up next year. It's called Hello Sunshine. So we're about to expand that into a second state. We did 10,000, we're just a little bit over in Melbourne this year. So I'll do that. I really want to use my social media presence to fucking help fuel that. I'm going to do like a comp where people can come run a festival basically and not put up $1.5 million and see the whole backstage part and continue to open that door for people to enter and watch the back of scenes.
Yeah, wow.
My alcohol company, we're still working on that. It's fucking growing massively. I eventually would like to exit out of that, sell it, because it's actually not where my heart lays. Like my heart lays back in promotion, music and events.
Yep. Okay.
I just don't want to rely on that income. So I'm sort of hoping that which sounds wild, but I'm a bit of a wild guy. I'm hoping the alcohol company like sells for some stupid multiple and then I can just work for fun for the next 20 years. Which is sort of what I've done my whole life anyway.
Yeah. That's kind of like, that kind of makes sense, I think, because it's probably very stressful too.
Weirdly enough, events is way worse than selling alcohol.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because that's like, when we launch a product, we got like
events,
10
I
weeks.
guess, it would be fucked.
I say it all the time. I was talking to this DJ course the other day, these kids, like musicians, and I literally was like, doing events 2 days a week was way more stressful than what I run running a multi-million-dollar company. Like I say, it's a weird thing because it's slow, but in events, like you've got to reinvent yourself every 5 days.
Yeah. And
there's no like, you can't be consistent. You've got to go on gut feel. You got to go on like instinct. Whereas like you can look at markets and how they drop and whatever when a big company. But like when you're working on that, it's like all of a sudden the music genre just dies. No one knows why. It's just not cool anymore.
Yeah.
And like you can't predict it. And your whole business might be fucking backed off that. You could go from, we were doing events, we would sell out in 2 minutes to we couldn't sell 200 tickets.
Yeah.
So it's like,
that is stressful.
It's super stressful. And the money you can lose in a day. Like I've seen people, I know people multiple that have lost $1 million in a day or millions in a day on a festival because of the rain.
Oh, I couldn't think of anything worse because I would not function very well in that kind of environment.
My first festival, we lost $400,000 in a day, and it was complete capacity pumping, and everyone was congratulating me like, "Bro, you're a fucking millionaire! Like, what are you like?
You've made it."
Yeah, everyone was like, "Congratulations, you would have killed it! You would have killed it!" And what they didn't know is that we were high fiving out the back because we didn't lose $1 million. Yeah, and so it's a wild way, but that's why I'm trying to open that conversation so people can see. That it's not all the glitz and the glamour that people think. We're real people.
Yeah, business people, proper business people. Yeah.
Passionate dudes who make bad decisions too.
Yeah, yeah. All right, well, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
You've just listened to In the Back Seat with Renee Gracie, a Mel and Kim Productions podcast.